I wanted to do kind of a follow-up to my aXIS hunt video where I take a 110-yard shot on an animal. I think it's kind of understandable why I would actually want to talk about it in depth a little bit more. I didn't want to like break the initial video up into a bunch of parts to talk through exactly what the thought process was, but I thought this would be kind of a cool, interesting exercise to go through. And there was some really interesting information about the deer's reaction that we got on camera that I'm really glad to have. Like, I feel like it's information that people can use. So to start, I was practicing with my setup out to 120 yards with broadheads. So, and when I say practicing, what I mean is at 120 yards, I'm shooting a reasonable group at 120 yards with broadheads when I'm, good and warmed up. I could lie and I could try to justify and say that I'm 100% positive that I was going to make a kill shot every single time on the animal, but that would be a lie. Like, it was the last night before we were going home. I was going to pick up a rifle the next morning and hunt because I wanted aXIS deer in the freezer. It was a high fence ranch, so I know that there's no risk of the animal leaving and going onto private and laying down somewhere where we can't get a hold of them. I also knew that they had two fantastic tracking dogs. That doesn't mean that I was like, it's okay if I wound the animal. What it meant was, if I get blood out of this animal, we will be able to go and find it and dispatch the animal. Like, it's not going to be a thing where I gut shoot something and it goes and lays down and is laying there for 12 to 24 hours slowly dying. That was not going to happen. If I get blood, we find the animal, we dispatch the animal. Would I make a 110-yard shot on an aXIS size animal under normal circumstances? I don't know. Because I know exactly what was going through my head under these circumstances, and I don't know. So let's talk about the setup a little bit so that you guys know the details about exactly what I brought. Day 6, 275 shaft. So that's the spine is a 275, not a 250 or a 300. 50 grain aluminum outsert, again, day 6, you buy it in a kit. I've got AAE Max Stealth 4 fletched, and then Fire Knock lighted knocks. Now, there was no lighted knock in this because I can't remember if I just had the weights in here or if the battery died, but I also ordered the wrong Fire Knock, and it's like a really specific specialized one, and the replacements that I ordered didn't come in time, so I wasn't going with a lighted knock on that trip. But just for weight, that's back there, and it's quite heavy actually. And then a small wrap. On the front end, this is one of the beat up ones. I was using a Iron Will solid 125. Like I said, I'd been practicing. I knew that those arrows could group at 120 yards. My rig was set up exactly how I wanted it for this trip. I've got a 15-inch bar up front, which is from Cutter Stabilizers with 3 ounces of weight. I've got an 8-inch back bar with 9 ounces of weight off the back. Matthews VXR. And then I ran a Montana Black Gold sight on this hunt. It's a 3-pin. And I set it up 30, 40, 50. And then that 50 is a slider pin. I've got 0.19 size pins for my first 2. And then a 0.10 for that second, for the third one. The third one, the Rover, is really small. And it's like that so that as we're getting further away, I can actually still see the target. And it's not just a bunch of light blowing out through the pin setup. I have changed the zebra strings into gas strings on this one, so I'm running gas, and then I've got a Hampski Pro Trinity something hybrid hunter, all those words put together. Everything worked really, really well. The only thing that I found out after the bear hunt that I just got back from was I have a dry socket on this, which means as I'm drawing back and the limb is flexing and going into place, it's actually making a little bit of noise. So I'm gonna have to take the bow apart, lithium grease inside the actual pockets to make sure that it's not making the noise, because it actually ruined one of the hunts one night where I drew on an animal and it took off because it heard that kind of creaking, popping thing. I guess during practice, I just didn't know that it was doing it. Like, I just didn't notice. It was so subtle. And then the other thing, I'm running their clear, harder plastic whale tail. And that combined with the dust that was all over the arrow, when I drew, it was the combination of the click and then this just as that thing drew across the whale tail, the aXIS that was at like 30 yards just took off. Needless to say, that was a gear failure on my part that we obviously made up for the next day when we got the long shot. So that's the gear side of everything. What I want to do now is I'm going to actually go into the computer and I'll do a screen grab and I'm going to take you guys through everything. We're going to talk through my draw and you're going to see how shaky I am at the start, and I'm going to talk you through exactly what was going through my head the entire time. Then we're going to talk about the deer and what the deer actually did. It was, again, something really interesting happened, and also the does that were around this deer. So yeah, stay tuned. To me, I find this part fascinating because we get to learn what it's like to send a projectile into an animal that they can hear coming at that distance that's not necessarily impacted by the shot of the bow. Because so many of the shots we take are 20, 30, 40 yards where they're hitting the snap of the bow and the speed of the arrow, and they're close enough to the snap of the bow that they go, ah! And they turn around and they take off and they run. We just hope that the arrow impacts properly before they're able to drop out of that shot. So this was a little bit of kind of a unique circumstance because of how far it was away. So let's go into the computer and we're going to break it down. We're going to start by talking about me and what was going through my head at the time. So you can see me dialing in the scope. I have ranged because the deer is standing there. And as of right now, the deer hasn't moved. Okay? Deer's standing in exactly the same spot the entire time from when I range. Take the rangefinder up, touch his body. It says 110. I go down to 110. Draw the bow. And he's quartering away, which I'm thinking like this is going to be perfect because I've got some variance in that shot now because of the width of this guy's body. This is going to be money. Watch my bow. Look at my bow. You see the shake? See the shake? So we're not looking at the animal. Don't worry about the animal. But you see the shake in the bow? I take a little while to warm up. And then coupled with the nerves that I have of taking a shot on an animal, this is me every single time I shoot an animal. That pin is dancing. And what I'm doing is just letting it kind of dance out there. And then what I allow it to do is to slow down. And then once it gets to a certain point, I will start to execute the shot because I know that as I continue to pull through, that pin dials in right where I want it to go, and then I release. And there's this brief moment, and you can see it right here, where I'm going frame by frame, but look, you can see the stabilizer move, and then you see it just kind of slow down. And what was going on in my head, that moment felt like it was super long. Like I was like, okay, we've settled down. Let's make this happen. Boom, shot goes off. Okay, that's what was happening on the thing that I could control. Now, what had happened with the deer in the meantime was the deer had gone from quartering away to quartering toward me. So watch that again. Perfect at 110. Then the deer started to turn. Took one step. Leaning forward. Took another step. And what I did then was drop a hair. Because at that distance, my arrow's dropping about 3 inches per yard. So what I did was drop it just a hair and then led him forward because it looked to me like he was getting ready to take another step. I know that my arrow is going to be in the air for about a second. Again, I understand if you wouldn't have taken this shot. I totally get it. And I know that there's probably going to be a lot of people that are like, what the hell are you thinking? I understand. I'm just telling you what was going on through my head. And I may later in life be like, yeah, That was not a shot that I would take now. But again, I want to be honest and just tell you exactly what was going on in my head. So I lower that pin into the animal a little bit further, knowing that I probably just lost a yard, maybe half a yard, but I'm anticipating that he's going to take another step. Okay, that shot breaks off. Again, I'm going frame by frame. So right now, you can see the deer in the top corner. I have let the shot go. Right here, the bowstring goes, right there. Okay? Deer isn't moving. Deer's not moving. I have my crappy follow through, which is this like weird pull in thing, and the bow has fallen. I have almost completely got the bow down, and right here is the first move that the animal makes. It's not reacting to the sound of my bow snapping. It knows that's 100+ yards away. That could be anything. This place is full of animals. It could be whatever else. He's not going to jump at that. He's moving because he hears the arrow coming toward him. That's amazing. It's a quiet setup. I've got max stealth vanes that are not loud. It's well tuned, and I've got a solid broadhead on the front end. It's not a vented head that those get kind of noisy. It's about as quiet as I can possibly imagine a setup being. And he hears it. Look who didn't hear it. See the doe in the background? Watch again. The doe in the background and all the doe, none of them moved. He perceived that that thing was coming for him. None of them perceived that. He perceived it was coming for him, and he bailed out of the way as best he could. So let's talk about where the actual arrow impacted. On the onside part of the deer, it enters into his liver. So I'm aiming at that front shoulder. He steps, it falls back, and it enters in through his liver. But look at his body position as he's rolling away right here. I think that it was somewhere in here that he's hit. Rolling away because the arrow hits through his liver on the near side and then exits high and right behind his shoulder on the right side. So as he's crunching his body up to try to roll out of the way, because that's what they do. And I've seen them slam their chests on the ground. When they hear a noise and they want to get out of the way, again, they're like whitetails on crack. Slam that chest on the ground and then bolt to try to get out of the way. Like hyper reactive. He crunches up. Arrow enters in through the liver on the near side and exits out right behind the shoulder on that far side through the lung, through the offside lung. He starts to slow down. And then he wants to come take a look. Because he's probably thinking, what in the heck happened? And if you look right at the bottom there, you can kind of see a little red spot forming right there. Why are you not zooming? Oop, I grabbed the wrong one. You guys are getting the raw, all the rowdy stuff. See it? Right there. It looks like it's a super low shot because if the arrow was just following its trajectory, then yeah, it would have been a low shot. But because he rolled his body, that roll motion that would have sent the arrow here, he rolls and the arrow goes clean through the middle of him and out the other side on that far shoulder. So this is what the guide could see. The guide could actually see that he was bleeding. And obviously we went and found the blood trail. We followed the blood for probably 100 yards as they called for the dogs, because they don't mess around here. They're not going to let this thing go lay down and then get kicked by another whatever. You know, I mean, there's tons of other animals in here that could go mess with this guy and continue to push him and bump him and move him. So they don't mess around. They just get the dogs out. I don't know where my journey as a hunter is going to continue to take me. My goal is to get closer. Okay, I took an 85-yard shot on an elk this year, a 68-yard shot on a whitetail that I spot and stalked, a 50-yard shot on a bear, and a 110-yard shot on an aXIS deer. I would like to get closer, which means I need to be a better hunter, because right now I'm pretty good at shooting a compound bow a long ways and actually hitting animals. One of the reasons Sarah Gamache, that was on this trip with me, said she switched to the trad bow was she wanted more of a challenge. Like, you're not shooting 110 yards with a trad bow. So she wanted that challenge, and I want to challenge myself as well to be better, to get closer. So that's one of my goals going into probably next year, is to try to not limit myself to having to reach out and take these big long bombs. But am I glad that I felt capable of doing that, that I had my setup really tuned so that I knew how it was going to perform at those distances? Yeah, because I would have picked the rifle up the next morning and I would have had to take this thing with a rifle rather than what I did, which was take it with a bow, which to me is so satisfying. The challenge of using a bow and taking an animal it's like nothing else, and I want to continue to do that, and I want to continue to get better at it. But I wanted to just come on here and explain what happened. I don't know if it's a justification, but maybe a little bit of a justification about what I did and what I went through. I don't know why the aXIS edit took me so long, but every once in a while one of these things just gets like stuck in my head and I can't just get it done. But I'm done and I'm moving on and things are going to be flowing. So more videos coming soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Brandon McDonald.